Uttara Sat Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. To all of our Guru Varga, our discipled succession of self-realized gurus, and to all the assembled devotees. First, I'm very happy to be with you all. I especially loved all of your kirtans, which made me feel like I was in Vrindavan and Mathura with Gurudev and all the Bengali bhajaniyas. Very lovely. Second, I would like to ask anybody who's up the stairs or in the back or in the corners that there's a lot of room right up front and on this very comfortable couch. If you'd all like to take a moment to resituate yourself. Then if you're bored stiff, I can see it on your faces and I can change the subject or something like that. There's lots and lots of room up front. And if any of you in the middle of the discussion want to move up front, feel free to. So the two main things that I was asked to talk about tonight by Raj Didi and by Rup Narayan Prabhu is Ekadasi, the depth of Ekadasi. Most everybody here, I'm sure, follows Ekadasi. But she said many of the devotees are not aware of the depth of this day of Ekadasi, which Gurudev said is not actually a day. It's actually Krishna himself. So Ekadasi and the importance and power of the holy name, which is our most important of all activities. There are 64 limbs of bhakti, beginning with Guru Parashraya, taking shelter of a bona fide Guru, taking bona fide Vaishnava initiation, following the instructions of the spiritual master, following in the footsteps of Vaishnavas, avoiding the 10 offenses in the chanting of the holy name, avoiding the offenses in deity worship, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees. There's 64 limbs of bhakti. Of them, there are 9 most important: hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the lotus feet, doing archan, carrying out the orders of the Lord, becoming a friend, surrendering everything. Out of the 9 most important, there are 5 most important. That is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, chanting the holy name, doing deity worship under the guidance of Shastra, living in a holy place like Vrindavan and Mathura, and what else? Sadhu Sangha. And of those 5, the 3 most important are hearing, chanting, and remembering. And of those 3, the most important is Harinam Sankirtan. So it's natural that that was requested to be a theme for tonight. So we'll start with Ekadasi. In Brisbane, it was Ekadasi, Brisbane, Australia, and Srila Gurudev came into the darshan room and sat on this big couch and had us sing Shuddha Bhakata Charanarenu, which is the song that he requests us to chant every Ekadasi. And because most of us were looking in the songbooks, he became upset and said, we must know this by heart. Then he went on to say that, again, Ekadasi is not a day, it's Krishna himself. Ekadasi manifested from the right side of Krishna, just as Srimati Radhika manifests from the left side. Why? Because once Krishna was taking a tour of his kingdom of all of existence, and he was going through the hellish planets, and he saw all of his sons and daughters there suffering in various horrible ways. Like, for example, there's one hellish planet where the constables of the Lord of Death would throw the victim, the sinful person, from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, and that person would break into thousands of pieces, and then they would put him together again, bring him to the top of the mountain, throw him off, and this would go on continually. In another hellish planet, Krishna saw that the sinful people had become worms in a planet called Kumbhipaka. They became worms, and they would all eat each other. All the worms in this lake would eat each other. For a brahmana who drank liquor, they would go to a hell where they would have to drink hot molten iron, boiling molten iron. Or for a brahmana who was attached to illicit sex, he would have to embrace a hot iron, somebody from the opposite sex, and at the same time get whipped by the constables of Yamaraj. Somebody who, like some government people or some envious people who tried to stop the Sankirtan movement, they would go to a hell where they would be sown length and breadth, just like some material when you're weaving something. They would be sewn like that. Somebody who was eating animals, he might be also cooked. So Krishna was seeing his sons and daughters going through these abominable conditions, and he was thinking, what can I do to save them? Yes, I will become a day, and if the people of the world would just follow the simple principles of this day, which is me, a titi, meaning a time period, a kadasi titi, they can be delivered from the cycle of birth and death. So this day falls twice a month, on the 11th day of the new moon and the 11th day of the full moon. And what is the significance of the number 11? Because we have 11 senses. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses, and also the mind. So on this day especially, we get extra credit for engaging the 11 senses in hearing, chanting, remembering, and serving Krishna under the guidance of his representative. So, another thing about the twice a month, on the 11th day of the full and new moons. Just like in the material world, I think most of you work, most of you have jobs. So they give you 1 day off a week or 2 days off a week. And if they didn't give you those days off, after some weeks you'd be too exhausted to work. So they're very intelligent, and they break it every so often so that you can rejuvenate and then go back to work on Monday and have reinvigorated strength. Similarly, Srila Gurudev explained that there are bacteria and insects in the body who are doing work for the body. And, or just like in school, you get Saturday and Sunday off, otherwise you couldn't just keep doing homework and going to school. So similarly, there's bacteria and insects in the body, and if they don't get time off, then they'll get sick. And if they get sick, they can't do their work, and then we also get sick. So Gurudev explains, he said, this is for those on the bodily platform. If they want a bodily or health reason, we need to give the bacteria and insects the time off. Also on those days, from Ekadasi to Purnima and Ekadasi to the new moon, the moon attracts water. So you'll notice that on the shore of the ocean, the tides come in more and the waves are very high because the water is trying to reach the moon. So similarly, there's water in our body. And when we take grains and other foodstuffs like that, like beans and grains, they act as blotters or sponges which attract the water and hold on to the water, which is rising because of the moon. And it can't flow out of the body. And so the body gets diseased. Srila Gurudev said they did a study in hospitals that most people die on the day of Ekadasi and just after. So for those on the bodily platform, there are health reasons as well. In Jagannath Puri, the priests who sell Jagannath's Prasadam, I think most of you have had Lord Jagannath's delicious Prasadam from Puri. They sell Jagannath's grain Prasadam, and they make a lot of money from that. So they don't like the fact that Vaishnavas observe Ekadasi, and they don't take grains on those days. So they had the idea that we will hang Ekadasi Devi upside down on the branch of a tree and tie her legs upside down as she's hanging. And they tried to convince all the Bengali Vaishnavas who were coming for Rath Yatra at around the Rath Yatra time, no need to follow Ekadasi, because if you simply take Jagannath Prasadam, that covers everything. And then in between that time, as long as you're taking Jagannath Prasadam, you can smoke cigarettes, you can take fish and all other nonsense things. But their main ace card was that they figured if we can get Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to take Jagannath Prasadam on the Ekadasi day, then all of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas will take. And they figured, surely, Mahaprabhu will not turn down Mahaprasadam. So while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was performing Sankirtan, they brought him some Jagannath Prasadam. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered obeisances, offered pranams, and then continued doing Harinam, Sankirtan with his associates, and glorifying Mahaprasadam throughout the whole night. In that way they were honoring Prasadam. Like Mahaprabhu would sing, Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnave Swapapanyamata Rajan Vishvashanavajayate. I once asked Srila Gurudev, we were on the roof of his Mathura temple, and I said, you often talk about serving Prasadam and honoring Prasadam. What do you mean exactly by serving Prasadam, other than, going around passing out the plates and subjects? How does an individual who's eating serve the Prasadam? So, because Gurudev would always say, don't take Prasadam, don't eat Prasadam, just honor and serve Prasadam. And he said, I've never eaten anything in my entire life. So when somebody asked me, well, how are you still alive? He said, because I honor and serve Prasadam, but I have never eaten anything. So I said, so what do you mean by serving Prasadam? So he chanted that verse that Mahaprabhu chanted, Mahaprasade Govinde. And he gave a whole new meaning to it, which was, O Mahaprasadam, you are non-different from not only Govinda, but you're non-different from Radha and Govinda. And you're non-different from their pastimes. So you can do whatever Radha and Govinda and their pastimes can do. You have all that power. And you have all the power that Govinda has to breathe in and out innumerable universes. And you are non-different. Mahaprasade Govinde Nam. You are non-different from Nam. Just as Srila Gurudev would say at initiation ceremonies, that just as Krishna can create innumerable universes in 1 second, destroy them in the next second, and recreate them in the next second, so Harinam has that same exact power. Because Harinam is the form of Krishna. It's the most subtle form of Krishna. Just like you have all these mobile phones, and they work because there's some, what are those towers? There's those towers, cell towers, and those electricity lines. So you can make a call from one end of the country to the other because of the electrical system that they've set up where sound travels. And let's say if Damodar Prabhu is calling his wife Anjali from across the country, Damodar's form is in New York. And if she happens to be in California, the subtle form of his form is traveling through the cell towers and the electricity and the ether and the wires, and then the form comes out on the other side, and she's actually talking to him and relating to him as a person. So if this is possible on a gross material level, then what to speak of the power of God? So the holy name is the subtlest form of God. And when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Harinama Tua Aneka Swarupa, oh Harinam, you killed Putana witch, you dance with the millions of gopis. It's not that the Krishna is in his holy name. The holy name is actually Krishna. So, Mahaprasadi Govinde Nam, you are none different from the holy name. You are none different from the pure Vaishnavas, who Prema Bhakti Yaho Haite Avidya Vinasajati. Just by hearing from them, they give Prema Bhakti, and as Prema Bhakti is coming, all the ignorance that causes my karma of the repeated cycle of birth and death, my innumerable births of karma, all gets washed away. All the ignorance that caused the sin, that caused the sinful reactions, all get washed away. So, Mahaprasadi Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnava. So, O Mahaprasadam, so this is how to serve Prasadam, Gurudev is saying. O Mahaprasadam, you are none different from Radha and Govinda and the holy name and the Vaishnavas. Therefore, you can give me whatever they can give me. What can they give me? They can give me Prema Bhakti, even Braj Bhakti, Kamatmika Bhakti, and they can take away all of my karma, all of my obstacles, all of my desire for sense gratification. So please, Mahaprasadam, give me those things. There's one prayer to Mahaprasadam, another prayer. Prema Danshame, Kama Danshame, Vaiva Vanshame, Veda Danshame, Jiva Danshame, Jiva Nanshame, Jiva Danshame, Daiva Danshame, Daiva Naparam. Oh Mahaprasadam, you can give me Prema Bhakti and also the love of the gopis. You are, all knowledge is in you. And you are my wealth. You are my life. You are the light of my life. You are my worshipful deity because you're none different from Krishna. And I have no other deity than you because you are Krishna himself. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is singing all these very beautiful prayers of Prasadam all night. And then in the morning, after he took bath and worshipped Lord Jagannath, he took the prasadam, put it to his head, and then he, at the time of pardon, he took that prasadam. So in that way, the priests in Jagannath Puri were foiled. I think that most of you know that very famous Ekadasi story about Maharaj Ambrish, right? Hands, right, everybody knows that. So I'm not going to tell that in depth, except just a few little glimpses out of that story. which is that when he had to decide, either I observe the Dwadasi Paran time and break my Ekadasi fast, because without breaking the fast at the right time, you don't get the full benefit of Ekadasi. So I have a choice that I can either offend Ekadasi by fasting until this Brahmana comes back to my house whenever he comes, or I can offend the Brahmana and follow the Ekadasi Vrat to the completion. So let me see. If I follow Ekadasi, then, and if he's offended, then he might kill me. He has the power to curse me so that I'll die. But so what? In a few years I'll be back. And I'll be back in just 1 year, actually, after coming out of the womb. And again I can practice devotional service. And after a few years, when my youthful consciousness comes back, then I'll just continue all my devotional practices. But if I offend Ekadasi, and even if I go to hell for offending a Brahmana, in hell I'll have my bhakti. But if I offend Ekadasi, which is Krishna himself, which is Bhakti Devi herself, then forever, even if I'm in heaven, I'll be bereft of my real life. I'll be like a fish out of water. So he decided to, as you know, take the Charanamrita. So in that regard, Gurudev told one incident. When he was in the hospital, one of his disciples approached him and said, "Oh Gurudev, my son is in critical condition. He's suffering so much. Could you please bless him with good health?" So Gurudev said, I asked her, "Do you want me to bless her with good health, or do you want me to bless him with bhakti?" And she said, she was so desperate, she said, "Oh Gurudev, please bless him with good health." So Gurudev said she was so foolish, she didn't realize that if I would bless him with bhakti, automatically, good health is automatically there. So Maharaj Amrish figured that if I follow the principles of bhakti, everything else will fall into place. And that's exactly what happened. Even though he didn't protect himself when Durvasa Muni pulled out that dreadlock and threw it on the ground in fury, and then that fire demoness, Krita, or her name was Pritya, the demoness, came to kill Maharaj Amrish, he was just weeping by remembering the pastimes of the Lord. And so the Sudarshan Chakra came to annihilate Durvasa Rishi. Why didn't it annihilate Durvasa Rishi? When Krishna threw his chakra to annihilate Shishupal, in 1 second his head was sliced. In 1 second Salva's head was sliced. Why didn't it kill Durvasa Muni?
It was to teach him a lesson.
What lesson?
Not to offend Vaishnavas.
Well, why didn't he teach him the lesson by that?
Merciful.
Also, Maharaj Amrish was praying on his behalf. He had so much power for strictly following the principles of bhakti, no matter what, that one of his powers was the power of humility, that is blaming himself. Even though there was no fault for himself, because he was a pure Vaishnava, he was thinking that this poor Brahmana is suffering on my account. So he was actually fasting the whole year in repentance. And he was praying that, "Oh Sudarshan, if I have done any service to you at all, then please cool down and don't kill this Brahmana." And when the Brahmana came to him, after going to Brahmaloka, Shiva Loka, Vishnu Loka, and having Lord Vishnu say, "I'm not going to help you. If you want mercy, go back and fall at the feet of my devotee." As soon as he did that, then Maharaj Amrish said, "Oh yes, please take all the results of my pious activities immediately be delivered. But why else? Santi? No. Because Durvasa Muni was actually...
Glorify the Vaishnavas.
He what?
Glorify the Vaishnavas.
Glorify the
He
position
only
of the
did it to
Vaishnavas.
glorify the Vaishnavas. That is, Durvasa Muni, and to glorify Ekadasi. Durvasa Muni is such a great soul that he goes to Vrindavan, and he associates with Krishna, and the cowherd boys, and the gopis, and he's the one who gave the benediction to Srimati Radhika, that whatever she cooks, anybody who would eat her food, they wouldn't be disturbed by any demon, they'd have longevity.